This is not the video that I thought I would be uploading today. Originally, we were going to be talking about the digital LSAT and get some advice from LSAT coaches. And if that is a video you are excited to see, make sure that you are subscribed and have your notifications on so you can hear that next Monday. But last night I was in my bed thinking about what I was uploading today, and I don't know, it just felt like not what I was supposed to be doing. It just felt like the wrong time for it, and instead that I was supposed to post what I am filming right now for all of you. So for those of you who have been to my channel before or maybe have come over to this from my being featured on Jubilee, you know that I am a very strong Christian. My faith is the most important thing in my life, and I would not be who I am today without my relationship with Jesus. And we're going to be talking about the way that my faith, and more specifically, the way that God has really influenced my law school journey up to this point, because some crazy things have happened in the last couple weeks and all along this journey that I just feel like need to be said and shared with anyone who's willing to listen. So if that's not you, Christianity isn't your thing, you're not interested in hearing about the ways that God has been working in my life up to this point, that's okay. No hard feelings. You are totally still welcome here, and welcome to any video and any advice that you are willing to hear. I hope you stick around anyway, but if not, I totally understand, and I'm happy to see you again next week. But if you are someone who is a believer or who is interested in hearing honestly what my experience going to law school has been like, this is a huge part of it, and I hope you stick around because it's a pretty incredible story, I think. I was a smart kid growing up, at least when it came to school and grades. I always had A's, and homework was very easy for me. It just wasn't something I had a lot of difficulty in. There were plenty of things I was terrible at, believe me, but thankfully school just wasn't one of them. And I always wanted to go into law. I've talked about that before too. The actual field and specific career came a little bit later when I was in high school, but I grew up being excited and passionate about justice and knowing that I wanted to be a part of that. And so my parents and family, my whole life growing up, would lovingly tease me about getting a full ride to law school. And while it might sound like something that they were supportive of and believing in me, and I'm sure that it was meant that way, to me it felt like this undue pressure because I knew that getting full rides to law school was not something that was 90% of people's experience, actually probably a lot more than that. And I didn't feel like law school was going to see me the way that my family saw me. And sure, I have good grades, but so do a ton of people going into law school. And sure, I'm passionate about justice, but hopefully most people going into law school are. I just didn't see that perspective or that background as something that was incredibly unique, that a law school would want to invest such a large amount of their financial endowments into. And I really didn't have a poor self-image or anything like that, but really there's just no part of me that believed or expected to get anything close to a full ride, honestly. And certainly not to a top 20 law school. My dream law school growing up was Notre Dame. And while that is a great school with a long tradition, it is not actually a top 20 school. I think it's around the 25 level. And that felt like such a reach, even to get in, let alone have a good scholarship to for that school or any others that I applied to. And so through the application process to Notre Dame and to several other law schools that I have already described in my law school reveal video, I had all these wonderful offers from really incredible institutions that I just really did not ever expect to receive. Maybe that was my own naivety. Maybe it was a little bit of just not thinking I was good enough, but I mean, it's crazy to assume that you're going to get a full ride anywhere The only place I felt confident that I was going to get a really high scholarship offer from was like my bottom safety school, which was ranked somewhere around the 50s or 60s. I knew that my LSAT and GPA were far above their medians and their 75th percentiles, and so I applied there knowing I would get a ton of money just in case I couldn't afford law school anywhere else. But even that should tell you, I really didn't think that I was going to be getting these kinds of scholarship offers from anywhere that I actually wanted to go. So to condense that part of the story, at least, if you're watching this, you probably already know that I will be going / am going to Washington University beginning this fall 2019, and I am doing that with a full ride and a living stipend, which is absolutely mind-blowing and so not what I ever thought I would get. But the way that it came about was such a God thing I can't even begin to explain, because one, I wasn't even going to apply to Washington University in the first place. I wasn't interested in going to St. Louis. I wasn't even looking there. I'd never heard of it before. And they sent me a postcard saying that they would pay for me to come visit the school. And because of that postcard, I ended up visiting, I ended up applying and really liking it. And then after that, I got a 3/4 tuition offer, which was, again, way more than I thought I would get. And then after pursuing further relationship with people in the admissions office and the dean's office, that offer was changed without me even asking to a full ride. And that was amazing. So now I had an incredible offer from a top 20 school where I wouldn't have to pay any tuition costs at all, which was not something I expected, and honestly something I was barely even praying about. If you watched my bullet journal video, you saw a quote at the very beginning that basically said, don't expect God to do big things if you keep all of your requests and your asks really small. And I think that's what I was doing. I don't even remember asking for a full ride from these schools because I just thought there's no way. But it was something that my family and my friends believed in me for, and I know that they were praying for it, and God answered those prayers on my behalf, even though I had little to no faith that that was even going to be an option for me. Then I found out that Washington University does their full rides a little differently. They don't just give you free tuition, they create a whole package for your 3-year program, things that are going to be goals that they're setting for you and helping you achieve, connections that they'll set up in mentorships and fellowships and jobs. And if you need extra money for specific things, they'll look into what awards that they have left to give out and try to apply those to your scholarship package as well. So it just so happens that the school that I wasn't even going to apply to before they reached out to me, which hadn't happened anywhere else, by the way, who also was giving me a full ride that I hadn't even asked for, God or from them, is also the school that has a long time tradition and practice of giving you more stuff on top of the full ride. When I was on the phone with the admissions dean talking about what I was looking for in my law school experience and what I was hoping to get out of it, I didn't even bring up the topic of extra funding for living or for summer stipends or anything like that, because honestly I was a little embarrassed. Like, who asks for more from the school that's already giving them the most? I knew that no other school was going to match their offer or even honestly come close, especially with how highly ranked Washington University was in relation to the other schools that gave me really great offers. It was the person I was talking to who actually asked, "Are you interested in receiving more money for a living stipend?" And I said, yes, of course I am, but I didn't even bring it up. I mean, I'd like to think that eventually I would have, so I didn't just leave money on the table that I would have eventually gotten, but I hadn't gotten to that point. I hadn't worked up the courage yet, and so for her to bring it up, even to me, was such a point of grace that she didn't even know she was participating in. And 2 months later, I got the full package in my email, that first outlined all of those mentorships and summer opportunities and things like that, with the following day getting another email saying that I was going to be getting a living stipend on top of everything else. But this video is obviously not a place for me to brag about something that I made happen, because it honestly isn't. It isn't anything I made happen. I worked really hard to have good grades and to study for the LSAT and to build relationships where I could. But ultimately, I did that with every school. And it was only with this school that I believe that God wanted me to go to, that He was opening a big old door for me to walk through, that all of these things lined up. This is part 1 of 3 that I want to talk about in this video, which is just that financial aid and selection of the school, both of which would not have happened without God's direction, honestly, because I wasn't even looking or asking for either of those things, and they just worked out for me. I remember actually towards the last couple weeks before I had to decide where I was going to school, for God to just make it so obvious where I was supposed to go. I was waiting for an offer from Notre Dame, and remember, that was what I always had as my dream school growing up, and I didn't know if they were going to match the offer or increase their offer at all. They had given me just under a full ride, and so I was appealing that decision just so I could have all the final numbers before I submitted a deposit and committed myself somewhere. And I was really wrestling with the things that I had grown up loving about Notre Dame and the things that I had just recently discovered and been literally jumping up and down about from Washington University. And so my prayer was, God, just make it really obvious. Slam one of these doors closed so I know that it's you who's taking me to one of these places. And the door to Notre Dame did not open any wider. I could have gone there, and I'm sure that God would have used me, and I wouldn't have been like smited with lightning or anything like that. But it really was so clear to me that when Notre Dame said no, that they wouldn't change their decision, that willingness to bring me in with everything that they had, that Washington University had displayed, was a sign for me that that was where God was leading me to go. The second thing I had to do, obviously, was to get a home to live in St. Louis. Because of the living stipend, I now had the luxury of living by myself in a decent apartment, which was something that was pretty important to me going into a new school where I didn't know anyone. I'm not a fan of living with people who I don't know. I've had some bad experiences. And so that was really awesome and an answer to prayer in and of itself. But I got really nervous because I found out in April that you can't really wait until the month before to select your apartment in a new area. And that might sound dumb. Maybe that's like common sense, but I did not know that. I've never had to pick out an apartment. My parents have never had to pick out an apartment. And so I just assumed that you could just go in like July and find a place for August. And apparently that's not how it works. And so I was freaking out in April because I wasn't going to be able to visit and find a place to live until literally July. We're gonna go check out the area and hang out for a couple days. If that's something that you guys want to join us on, I'll be posting on my Instagram stories, so you can check out the description below to find my handle for that. But yeah, I was freaking out in April when I found that out, so I spent a full 3 days just compiling this list of every listing I could find that would possibly be available in August, because a lot of things had already been picked up from returning students the month before. I was writing down phone numbers, I was writing down parking information, I was writing down the utilities that they provide, the distance from the school, obviously the rent, the deposit, and every piece of information that I could get my hands on. Me and my mom spent an entire afternoon just working down the list, calling every single number, figuring out what was available and what the costs and amenities and all that would be. And we found this one place that was just everything I wanted for the rent that I was going to be able to pay. I'm really looking forward to sharing that experience with you of moving into the apartment, decorating and organizing the apartment and all of that. I'm going to do a little bit of a mini series, I think, in August or September where I upload all those videos. So you will be able to see just how crazy it is that I got this place. I'm paying about the lowest rent I could possibly be in that area for this level of a single bedroom living with a place that has security and free parking and in-unit washer machines and just a lot of stuff that usually doesn't come for places that are under $1,000, whereas I'm a decent chunk under that. And so for that to even be available when I started looking, we had called the management company for this place literally the afternoon after they had just heard from the current residents of the apartment I'm moving into that they would be moving out in July, which means that they were looking to rent it out for August. And apparently this place, their apartments moved really quickly after like a couple days. And so the fact that I called before it was even listed and got it done that day was just another God thing on top of the tuition and the living stipend. And now I had this perfect apartment. It was just all lining up for me, even though I was freaking out about all of it. So now we're getting to the thing that has prompted this video, which was transportation. I'd heard from a lot of people in St. Louis that you really just need to have a car, that there is public transportation available, but it is not sufficient for the needs that you'll have, especially if you're not living with someone with a car. Or have relatives in the area who could drive you around or whatever it might be. But my car that I have here in Southern California would not survive that trip. Let me just tell you, this car is 20 years old. It used to belong to my grandma, and it has served me very well since I was 15. But it is only with bubblegum, duct tape, and a lot of prayer that this thing has not fallen apart yet. So there's just no way that it was gonna survive like a 3-day drive to St. Louis and then 3 years in St. Louis with winters and even just regular driving activity. There's just no way that's happening. So I knew that I was going to need a new car, not necessarily like new off the lot, but new to me and less than 20 years old. So my initial thoughts were that I was going to have to buy a used car or maybe even lease a car for 3 years, neither of which was really appealing financially for me. Doable, but not something I was looking forward to completely draining my bank account for. Literally, earlier this week, I was talking with one of my friends and catching up, and she asked me what I needed prayer for, what she could be praying about, and I told her I'm really stressed about this car situation. I want to make sure I find a good one, that I'm not scammed for some junk car that I'm stuck with, or something that's going to have a lot of maintenance issues while I'm there in St. Louis by myself. And she said, yeah, no problem. And I just felt very frustrated with my own self that I was so worried about this relatively small issue when God had just taken care of like the big issues of going to school, paying for school, and living in a nice apartment. Like those were way bigger problems than just like finding a car for a couple $1,000s. But it was really just giving me stress and distracting from the excitement that I have that I'm actually going to law school in 2 months and that whole move. I was annoyed that was bothering me so much, that I had this lack of faith that God was going to take care of the smaller things when he had already taken care of all the big things. And so I was expressing that to my friend, and she was saying, yeah, no problem. I'll totally be praying for you. Make sure you let me know when God answers that prayer. And I said, okay, I will. You guys. Literally the next day, my grandmother shared with me that she was going to be gifting me her spare car. She said, Nicole, if you take over, maintenance and you put it in your name and you pay the car insurance and all that, like, you can have it. You can drive it to St. Louis, and that way you don't have to worry about flying out there. You don't have to worry about renting a car for a while until you find a different one. You don't have to worry about any of that. You can just have this one. The fact that that literally happened the day after I asked someone to pray about it, I mean, that's nuts. Like, that's not a coincidence, especially in line with all this other stuff. And God has just been so good to me. There's this song that's called Take Courage, and it's about God being present in our waiting periods where we feel like nothing's moving, nothing's happening. It's an encouragement to stay steadfast and faithful and believing that God is there because God is in the waiting. And if this just tiny testimony doesn't demonstrate that, I don't know what does, because I've been sitting around in Southern California for 6 months now. I have another 2 months to go before law school starts. And in that period, I've had to choose my law school. I've had to find an apartment. I had to find a car. And I had to have a job. I had to be able to save up money. And God has made all of those things happen without like any effort on my part. My entire effort on these things has been worrying about it and stressing about it and complaining to other people about it and asking for prayer without a lot of, honestly, believing that those prayers were going to be answered in a timely fashion that was going to work out for me financially and emotionally. And when I just stop and think about that and look back at the last couple months and all that has happened with no help from me, and God just really using other people to speak into my life and point me in the right direction, I'm astonished by his goodness and his faithfulness and the way that he's working in fulfilling and manifesting this calling that I feel like he's placed on my life ever since I can remember. And it's such a blessing even that he's opened my eyes to be able to acknowledge those things, and that I have this platform with all of you to share that and just tell you, like, oh my gosh, he's called you to incredible things that are so beyond your imagination that you don't even think are possible. He's already in the works of making those things happen if you'll just step out in faith and follow them and just say yes to what he presents in front of you. It might be scary and it might not be what you wanted, it might not be what you thought that you were going to be doing next, but when that door opens, I just want to encourage you to like step through that with faith, maybe that you don't even think you have yet, but as a building block of that kind of foundation for a relationship with the creator of heaven and earth, who loves you and who wants you to succeed and take hold of that destiny and identity that he's created before the beginning of time for you. I just want you to know that you are loved, that God has really awesome things in store for you, and it has nothing to do with what you've done, what your abilities are, or even who you are. It's about who he is, what he's done, and how he has already equipped you without you even knowing it to grab hold of those things. I didn't want this to be a soapbox, and I hope that you don't feel like you're being preached at, but this is just what's honestly been happening in my life, and I think it's amazing. And I just know that he's going to do even more incredible, amazing, mind-blowing things in my life because he already has been, and we're just getting started. And I know that he's going to do those for you too. So if any of what I just said has resonated with you, I would love to hear about it. I could talk about this all day. Please let me know. Please share your stories with me and share them with other people too. Talk about what God's been doing in your life. And if you don't believe in God and you've still watched this whole video, first of all, thank you. Second of all, I would still really love to talk to you and hear about what's been happening in your life, where you feel like maybe there would be an opening for God to step in, to show himself and reveal himself to you. Because I know that he's already died to do just that, to pursue relationship with you because he loves you. I think I'm all done for this week. That was a lot, but God has been moving, and I think it's good to acknowledge when that happens, or at least when we notice that it happens. And I'm just really excited to see what happens next. I'll see you all next week. God bless until then.